What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to go through my XEROSEPS tonal separation and colorization template. I'm going to show you exactly how I use the template, some tips and tricks to get the best effects with it, and I'm also going to break down a couple of images that I made using it. So without further ado, let's hop into Photoshop. When you extract the XEROSEPS zip file, you will see a PSD folder which has a dark and a light. Obviously these two are for dark garments and light background garments. You will also see an action which is supplied, which will dither the paintbrush within a layer mask, and I will show you exactly how that functions within this video. So let's jump into the tutorial itself and a breakdown on how this template functions, how I use it, and some tips and tricks to kind of get the most out of it. I originally created this template to speed up my workflow using what I refer to as the grain and stamp separation technique, which is separating the tones and colors into highlights, midtones, and shadows. Okay. The template itself is set up as a 16 by 20 300 dpi document. So let's get into it here. So the first step that you want to do when you open up this document is, if you click on this, which is red here, open to edit design, you will open up a smart object. So the way this template works is you will modify the smart object initially, and after you save it, it will update within the template itself. So it will do all the separations for you. So it will separate the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. And then from that point, you can colorize everything per separation. And then I will also show you how to use the alternate colors to go from a 3-color design to up to a 6-color design, or more technically you could do. Typically I will go up to usually 5 or 6, depending on what I want to do with the design itself. So back to the smart object. When you open up the smart object, you will see a folder here, place design in this group. So this is an example design. This is a composite that I put together separately. And from that point, we have some level adjustments here. So like dark and midtones, light and midtones, blown highlights, heavy contrast, and then a custom slider so that you can go into the levels and modify it yourself to suit your image how you like it. The way this template is, you're going to do a lot of sort of back and forth between the smart object itself and the XEROSEPS main template file. It's just the nature of this technique. It will take a little bit of adjustment, but the workflow is super convenient, and it will save you a ton of time using this technique. So moving from there, so we have the levels adjustment, and then above that we have a halftone optional, which is you can basically layer in. I have supplied 2 different patterns here. I have a halftone dot 60 degrees, and then I have a halftone cross. Okay. So I'm just going to enable that just to kind of show you. So these halftone patterns will basically work within the template to create a different look than the default aesthetic. The texture folder above here, I put in different textures. You're certainly welcome to create another layer and put on your own textures and really kind of modify what you want to do in these areas here. So like I have some plastisol cracks, which are from my vintage plastisol brush set, which I just kind of put into a layer. So you can see there's different styles here. You can certainly move these textures around. So we're going to turn that back off, turn that on. These vertical cracks I have on. So I'll turn the vertical cracks off for now, just so you can kind of see. But I also wanted to go over this grayscale, this adjustment at the top here. So what I've found with this template, the best way to get the most out of it is to work with a grayscale image. The reason for that is because you have a better control over the tonal range of the image itself. So the template, since it functions off of your shadows, midtones, and highlights specifically, the more you can control and adjust that tonal range, the better the final result will be within this template. Which is why I give these level adjustments here, and then additionally the grayscale adjustment at the top. Now for this specific example that I have within the template, I don't really need this grayscale because my base image was already grayscale. So that leads me into how my workflow is, where I actually composite my image within a separate document so that I can kind of refine and get my tonal values better without having to work within the smart object here. You could certainly build your composite from within this smart object, but I usually work separately and then just paste the final image into the smart object just to keep the file size down a little bit, because it is a relatively large file. So I'm gonna put in one of these halftone patterns here. Now you can adjust, if you double click on that, you can adjust the scale of the halftone dots, right? So we can make them smaller, you can make it bigger. I'll put it back where it was, about 80. I wouldn't really mess with the degrees here because the halftone pattern already has a 60-degree angle on it. I would leave the layer style set to overlay. So after you make some adjustments within the smart object, you will just save this smart object. So Command S or Control S if you're on a PC, and you'll have to wait for a second here until it updates all the smart objects within the main template. So I would say when you're working within this template, just be cognizant of the fact that with all these different separations, it takes a minute for it to, fully update throughout the template. Okay, now that that has saved, I will hop back into the main XEROSEPS, and you will notice that we have a nice color separated halftone pattern. So this is how it was beforehand, and then if I update, you can see how it affects. So the halftone pattern, I also took off the vertical cracks from within that smart object. So you can see a totally different look depending on if you want to apply that halftone dot or not. So let me turn that one off and I'll put the cross one on just so you can see. And then I will save this. And there you go. So another completely different look, different aesthetic. Got some really nice, pretty cool details going on here. So just a different look depending on what you want to do. So I'll go back into the smart object here and I'll turn that off for now. There's the vertical cracks again. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to break down the actual template and show you. Let me save this out quick again. So I will break down the actual template and show you how it functions and the adjustments that you can make to it. And then after that point, I will kind of show you how I composite my images. I will also break down an image that I fully built using this template. And I'm going to also show you how I colorize these separations. Okay, so this is like the base layout of how XEROSEPS comes. So you can see as of right now, we have a gray shadow color. We have a pink mid-tone color, okay? And then we have a sort of tan beige highlight color. So let me I'm gonna turn off the highlight separation just to kind of show you guys how it works. So within the shadow color here, the shadow folder I should say, we have the smart object, which is in the shadow effects, and that is basically a duplicate of this smart object. So it's duplicated within the shadow, within the midtone, and within the highlight. Okay. Now applied to each separation is a filter gallery effect. And that's really the basis of how this template functions to create the separations for you. So the default setting, we have 2 grain layers and a stamp layer within the filter gallery. You're welcome to adjust these light and dark balances, but I've found that really they're pretty good the way I have them set, but you may need to adjust like the highlights, for example, or something like that. So you'll have to experiment a little bit depending on what your image is and the final result that you're looking for or that you get. So let me enable the midtone separation, which is basically the same thing as the shadow separation. However, the filter gallery stamp here, that's really the only one that I change on each of these separations. The stamp has more darkness, right? So there's less of the light coming through, right? The shadow one, if we go back into that, is all the way down here at 1, as you can see. So it progressively gets more through each separation. So let me enable the highlights then, and I will go into that quick and I will show you. So you can see the highlights on the stamp are up at 48. So it started on the shadows were at 1, and then the midtones were somewhere in the middle, and then the highlights are all the way up at 48. Okay. And really that's how the template works. So it separates your image into tonal values, and then we basically assign colors to each separation to create this sort of this cool layering effect. The other nice thing about this template is that all of your colors are fully separated, which makes it perfect for screen printing, direct to garment, and DTF, so direct to film as well. It will make your printer's life easier. You have better control over your colors. They don't have to actually use a halftone rip, so it makes your efficiency a lot nicer. So let's see here. So colorizing. So the shadow layer, I often go with a gray sort of tone, but you can see I usually will go for the shadows, I'll go a little bit darker, right? So go a little bit darker, a little bit more of a neutral tone. And then for the midtones, then I start to bring in some color. Okay. Now I will say that probably the most time consuming part of using this template is figuring out your color palette between the shadows, midtones, and highlights. because obviously if you have the wrong tone, it's going to be hard to kind of make something that goes well together. So keep that in mind, that you're going to have to do quite a bit of back and forth and kind of modifying these tones so that they all work together seamlessly. And then the highlight color here is sort of this off beige color. Now you can see this isn't the whole way up value wise, and the reason is because there is some little details which are in this drop shadow here. So the drop shadow is basically, I have this one set up as a shadow layer itself, which gives this effect. So if I zoom in here, you can see the black shadow underneath the highlight separation, which gives a nice depth to the template itself. So if I turn that off, you can see it loses that depth, right? And sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying you have to leave that all the time. It depends on the look you want to go for. I personally like it there. I think it gives a nice depth and actually physically looks like the paint is layered, or maybe not the paint, but the ink, I guess you could say. So that's the first drop shadow layer, and then I have another one set up, which is a white highlight. So the first one here is the shadow, and then the second one is actually a highlight. It's set up so that it's on the top here, so you can see, right? So that gives an interesting effect as well, depending on what you're going for. Sometimes it can get a little bit to be too much, so that's why I have the options to use it or not use it, but it can give a nice detail and something that you should be aware of. Let's see here. So I also have the same sort of thing going on with the midtone. You can enable that if you like. So you can see this one I have like a yellow, right? So there's a lot of different things that you can modify to kind of get different looks. The default, I have it off, and then I also have it on the shadow separation here. I don't typically use it on the shadows just because the shadows are just kind of like your base. I only really like to add it to the midtones or the highlights just because those are the upper levels, and I don't think it really looks right on the shadows, but by all means you can experiment with it. So as far as pushing the color even more, say you have these three tones set, but you want to add some additional color, or an alternate color I should say. So obviously if you alter another shadow color, whatever you paint over within this mask, it's going to colorize the gray parts, okay? So I'll do an example of the midtones here. So if I only want to change the color of the midtones, which is the pink, what I do is I'll turn on this color, this solid color, and then I'll click on the mask. Now there's two different things that you can do. Base wise, I usually use the pencil tool, because that way it will keep everything hard and dithered and there will be no transparency within it. So that's sort of the goal, because everything is set up print ready. With anything printing, you don't want to have transparency. So I would recommend not using the regular brush tool. However, you can use a regular brush tool if you use the dither mask action that I have that comes with the template itself. So first off, I'm going to start with the pencil tool. I'll open up. So I'm just going to use a regular hard pencil brush. So if I go into the layer mask itself, because it's black, that means that everything is hidden right now, right? So since the color of the mask itself is black, that means on our swatches over here, we want to paint with white, okay? So I have a green right now. So say I want to make these letters green instead of pink. This is all I do. Super easy. So there we go. Now we have successfully brought in some green, and then we can also add green you know, wherever we want to. You can also use grunge brushes here, you know, so if you want to add some different color variations within the actual skull itself, things like that. I'll add some green tones here just to show you as an example. Right, and then I'm going to go into this yellow separation on the highlights, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paint in there. So after you paint it, say you're like, all right, well, I added too much. Then all you want to do is press X on your keyboard, which will also flip these checks. And then you'll paint with black once again and get like a grunge brush or whatever, and then you can just kind of stamp it. And there you go. And then you're removing it. So that's one way to colorize it. And then I will show you how the action functions. So let me flip these checks again, and then I'm going to reset. If you want to reset the layer mask itself, since we want to have a black background, you want to have your checks with the black on the background, and then you're going to hit Command backspace, and it will fill everything within this layer mask so that it's basically how it started. Okay, so everything will be hidden. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the brush tool. So a regular round brush. We're going to leave my flow at around 10%, so it's not full opacity. We're going to make the brush a little bit bigger, and then we're going to go on a soft round brush here, right? So basic round brush. And then we're gonna start adding some green to certain areas, right? Let's add a little bit of green in here. So we get a nice little fade going on there. Now, the way it sits, we could not use this because we used a soft round brush. It's on the brush tool. There's transparency within that mask, and we do not want that. So what you want to do, you want to click on the mask, and then you want to go into the dither mask action here, and you want to press play. And it's going to go through this process, and boom, it is now dithered. So you can see the hard edges there. See how the green has hard edges now? So if we go into the mask itself, you can see it dithered all those edges, right? Because if that wasn't there, so I'm just going to go back. So that's how it looked before the action, and that's how it looks after the action. So you can see, using that mask technique, you can get a much better fade between your colors, right? Which is super nice. Gives you a nice fade, and everything's print ready. It's very convenient to use. So that way, with the pencil tool, you only have like hard edges, and then you kind of have to go in and use your texture brushes and things like that to kind of create the dithering effect. This way you don't have to do that. If you just run the action, it'll dither it for you. Now if you go back in here and you paint more again, then you'll have to run the action one more time. So anytime that you paint within the mask, or add color I should say, you'll have to run that action or use the pencil tool like I said. So from that point, I want to show you exactly how I composite the image separately instead of compositing it within the smart object itself. So let me open up one of my composites here. So as you can see, this is just a, skull image. I have all the flowers separately in here. All my images, all my text, everything else is already broken down within this document, which is also a 16 by 20. I went ahead and made my image grayscale right away because you can either go in, like for example, you can either go in here and go to image adjustments, shadows and highlights, and then you can adjust your shadows and tone. You can make all your different adjustments here that you want. This is a very useful tool to use for the grayscale to really get some nice adjustments out of the tones. I will like to use the dodge and burn tools. So dodge tool, burn tool, and then I'll go through like the shadows, midtones, highlights, and make adjustments. Of course, I would say if you're going to use the dodge and burn tools, you'll want to do duplicates of your base image. Dodge and burn tools are destructive. I've used Photoshop for so long that working destructively does not bother me, but it's important to make duplicates. That's why you see I have duplicates of each of my main images, which I'm really like compositing, right? So after you have your composite, then I will just, Control A, select all, and then I'll do a edit, copy, merged, okay? And then I will go into my smart object here, and then I'll just paste the design directly into the smart object. And then I'll make my adjustments that I need to. I'll save the file, and then I'll check it in the final output here to see what I like, see if there's anything that, like for instance, like if something's too dark in this area down here, or if I want some better tonal range within, say, this flower, for instance, right? Say I'm not getting enough definition in here, or these little leaves right here aren't showing enough in the highlights or in the, well, that would tell me that I need to go back to the composite and I need to lighten up these areas or darken the areas. Usually it's a matter of using the dodge tool and sort of lightening areas so that they so that they stand out nicely. But the point that I'm trying to drive home here is that your tonal range is extremely important for this template to have the best effect possible, because if your tonal range is really shitty, you're not going to have a good image. So let me just show you, like, so for instance, if I added heavy contrast, or let's just lighten the midtones just to show you how it will affect the overall look. All I did was add this level adjustment here to lighten the midtones, and I'm going to save that, and then you'll see how the full image changes depending on my tonal range, right? Although this template makes things very easy in terms of doing the technique. So you can see, because I bumped all those midtones up, it added all these darks within the darks here. So the eyes have a lot more within them now, right? So if I undo that, mostly the shadow layer or the shadow separation really came out. So you can see, right? So that had to do with, because I turned on this lighten midtones, right? So I'm just trying to show you that you're going to get drastically different effects depending on your tonal range. The nice thing about the grayscale adjustment here is if you turn that on, say this was a full color image. If you turn this on and you get the grayscale adjustments, you can actually go into like the reds of the image and turn them down and turn the yellows up. You know, you can play with these settings. I personally like to desaturate everything and just adjust it on the fly within my composite. At most, I will use the custom slider and kind of modify and tweak things if I need to. So that's the dark template itself. And then I'm going to go into the XEROSEPS light background, which is basically the same as the dark. The only difference is that everything is flipped. So instead of the highlight being on top, we have the shadow on top, the midtone in the middle, obviously, and then the highlight is on the bottom. And the reason for that is because it's a light background, so the colors layer differently. So the same thing with the light version. If you go into the smart object here, it's the same exact color breakdown. The only difference is the texture has a screen overlay to it. So this was another composite that I did separately. So I built this composite out in a separate file as well, and then pasted it in here. And you can see I have a custom adjustment set on this one. So I basically just darkened it to bring a little bit more of the midtones and shadows in. And then I'm going to show you another example of like colorizing. Shadow separation within the light colored garment is going to be, the shadows are going to be on top. So it's going to go light, midtones, shadows on top. So the shadows are always going to be darker. So my shadows currently are this sort of like dark gray kind of tone. So if I want to make the teardrops blood, then I just go into the layer mask here, select the pencil tool, and then we'll make the brush smaller. And then we're gonna zoom in. And since I'm doing this quickly, it's not going to be perfect, but you get the idea. So you'll have to actually like render that out a little bit nicer, but get the idea. Right? If I want to do the brush tool again, say I want to make some red fades within the eyeball, right? Say I want to go some red fades like in here. Then I have to dither that then. So I want to click on the mask, and then I want to play this dither mask action again. And then you can see it dithered it nicely. So we get a nice color separation. Now obviously that doesn't really fit there, but for an example, I just wanted to show you you know, how it would function. And then we're going to get rid of that. So let me show you like this example and how I broke it down. So here's a final built out file using the template and then colorizing it. And then I added like some texture and stuff just for presentation purposes. Like if I turn that off, there you go. So that's a build out file with like, you know, different colors. So I'm coloring the bees yellow, coloring my bloody tears, you know, pink. Down here you can even see like I've gotten 3 different colors going on in my highlights. So the possibilities are really endless on what you want to do with this. And, you know, it gives you the ability to really kind of customize it fully and get this great vintage aesthetic while also having a nice fully color separated document. So let me close this. Now I will also show you, I'll show you another example. Totally build out file using this template. So if I turn the presentation off, turn my textures off. So this would be the base file itself that I build out. So let's take a look at like what's going on here exactly. So effect template. So the shadow separation, I don't have an alternate color set. I just have the sort of like brownish gray, like a warm gray tone. And then the midtones, I have this like sort of like rusty color, which would be, you can see. And then on that rusty color, I added this alternate color, which is right in here, you can see. So because I wanted to make these like glowing, that was the way I did it. So I added a more intense pink on the midtone, and then on the highlight, like if I turn that off, you can see, so this is how the natural highlight would be, which is this like tan beige color. And then I painted in with this orange color here. So I painted in the mask, you can see there, wherever I wanted that glowing to look. So I made it glow in here, glow there, right? So me telling you this in this video, I realize that it sort of makes it sound like easy, but I want you to know that it takes a while to figure out these color palettes and really kind of go through and tweak things and modify things so that everything seamlessly fits together nicely. So let me see here. So I think that I originally added some light highlights, so you can see there, but I ended up removing those because I felt like it didn't need it, and I wanted to keep the, so you can see in there, I felt like it didn't really need it personally. As you can see, I also put some pink in the eye there. But oh, one other thing that I wanted to show you, this upper layer here, this texture knockout, it says texture knockout, use black. So if I turn that layer on, and the way to use this layer is sort of as extra texture that goes on top of the texture that we already have within the smart object. So a great example of something to use here would be my vintage plastisol brushes. So if you go on the pencil tool, and I'm just going to select one of my vintage plastisol brushes. So we'll go with like this one, or maybe we'll do this one. You want to make sure that you use black. So I want to flip my check so that I'm on black. And then I'm going to click, and you can see I added all these other little texture elements here. Now the nice thing about the way I have this set up is that it's set up as a knockout layer. So what does that mean? That means that if I turn the background off, the black, because it's a knockout layer here, it's going to cut right through the design itself. So you can see it's cut right through the design except for the background, which is super nice. when you're actually going to go and print this, because otherwise, if it wasn't a knockout layer, you would have, when you turn off the background, you would have the black showing through onto the transparent background, which is not what we want. Both the template and that brush set work very nicely in tandem with each other. Gives it a little bit extra texture where you might want it. This design specifically, because I already have like quite a bit of texture going on. I didn't really need it on the knockout, but you can see you can add some nice extra stuff going on here if you really want to grunge it up. The options are really limitless. So make sure that you don't delete this layer, and make sure that you use black if you want to use it as a knockout layer. Otherwise it won't work properly. I should also say, do not change the order of these layers or turn off these clipping masks on the colors or anything like that. You might break the template. If you want to pick up the template and you want to pick up the vintage plastisol brush set, both are available in my asset shop, which is Sludge Factory, sludgefactory.design. They're both there, and that pretty much wraps up the tutorial itself and the breakdown on how this template functions and how I use it. If you really want to speed up your time and your efficiency, this template is a surefire way to do it. If anyone has any questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram. Thank you for watching. I hope that you guys got enjoyment out of this, and I hope that it was helpful. I will see you on the next one. Peace.